Illinois faces some big challenges. Today, we're about to hear a truly honest analysis of the problems we face. Equally as important, you'll also hear an in-depth discussion of some practical solutions. This is your radio source for stories, the insight, and the answers you won't hear anywhere else. Not in the media and not coming from Springfield. You're listening to Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute. Now, here's your host, AM 560's Dan Proft.
Welcome to Illinois Rising. I'm Pat Hughes of the Illinois Opportunity Project, filling in for the great Dan Proft this week. Dan, I think, is lamenting the fact that his Pittsburgh Steelers are not currently, as we speak right now, in the AFC Championship game, so I think he had to take some time off to deal with that. Joining me today on Illinois Rising is my good friend Ted Dabrowski. He's Vice President of Policy at the Illinois Policy Institute. He's my friend and a friend of the program. Ted, welcome to the program.
Pat, thanks, and it's good to be here.
Ted, big news this week out of CPS. Leaders Radonio and Durkin, who are the minority leaders of the caucuses, the respective Republican caucuses, both Senate and House, Radonio in the Senate, Durkin in the House, introduced legislation this week to take some power away from CPS and bring it to the state level. Can you explain to the viewers sort of what happened there?
Yeah, CPS has been in all kinds of trouble, headed towards bankruptcy. The finances are in a massive mess. They passed a budget recently that had a $500 million hole. CTU is threatening a strike. The kids' results are horrendous in terms of overall performance in terms of reading, math. And so what happened is, Rahm Emanuel has been waiting on a bailout from the state government to right the ship for Chicago, at least to plug the hole, I should say.
And what's the number on that ballot? What's he looking for?
Well, he's looking for $500 million from the state. Okay, so, Rauner said, look, the state is broke too. We can't afford just to bail you out, especially if you keep doing things the same way you've been doing them all along. And so, Rauner's right. There's got to be major reforms before we can even think about putting more money into Chicago. And so, ironically, Rahm Emanuel was speaking yesterday in Washington, D.C. on crime and violence on a panel. So while he was doing that, we had some legislative leaders from the Republican side saying they want to pass a law that includes Chicago, in a law that already exists where the State Board of Education can take over a school district, so now including Chicago, if financially they're broke or in trouble. And so that's the law they want to put out in place. And what they also want to do is allow for CPS to go bankrupt. And so those two things would allow, finally, a lifeline for CPS to change the way it does things and to bring in some professional management, because CPS has totally failed. Rahm Emanuel and his board, his appointed board, have failed dramatically.
Right, and the Democrats, Mike Madigan, who's the Speaker of the Illinois House, John Cullerton, who's the Senate President, of course, the mayor, the Chicago Teachers Union, Forrest Claypool, who heads up CPS, they're all opposed to this, right? And my understanding is the reason they're opposed to this is because they like to keep power where they have it currently. Unfortunately, that power has led them to have absolutely no money, where they're seeking a bailout from the state. The state doesn't have the money to give them a $500 million bailout. And on top of that, and you mentioned this in your remarks, they have repeatedly, and this is going over several years, failed the students of CPS. I have some statistics here that are mind-boggling. 82%, think about this number, 82% of CPS students are not college ready, and 70% of Black and Hispanic students, which make up the majority of the students in CPS, cannot read at the third grade level when they're in third grade. And yet these folks don't want any type of state intervention. They don't want anyone coming in to sort of change the nature of it. So they're $500 million in the hole, $500 million they need to do what? To spend $500 million to continue to not educate the children? Where is that $500 million going to go? In my view, it's going to go to the teachers unions and to the bureaucrats and to the structural problems that have existed from the beginning.
Well, Pat, you're absolutely right. This is why nobody wants to bail out CPS right now. It is an absolute black hole. It's a black hole in terms of where the money goes, and it's also a place rife with corruption. And we just saw that the superintendent just got arrested for fraud. for corruption, sending money to contracts that she was finagling.
Is that unique to us, by the way? Because it seems like every time someone's in a prominent position, they get arrested in our state.
Well, I wouldn't say that Chicago is unique to that kind of corruption. It happens in other big cities. I would just say that we are the experts at that stuff. We're the number one in the nation. So that's the sad part.
And Bird Bennett was Emanuel's hand-picked person to come in and change this around. He was all enthusiastic about it, and look what's happened. And speaking of Rahm Emanuel, he has taken a beating on several issues, the Laquan McDonald, this situation now. And, I remember a time during the election when Rauner was running for governor, when everyone was fearful that he was going to cozy up too much to Rahm Emanuel, that they were going to sort of, divide and conquer and divvy up the spoils between the two of them. That doesn't seem to be the case. I've got a clip from Governor Rauner on this issue. Ted and our listeners, listen to how Rauner goes directly at Rahm Emanuel, who, ostensibly was supposed to be his friend.
The mayor has failed on this. He's failed on public safety. He's failed on schools. He's failed on jobs in the neighborhoods. He's failed on taxes. He's failed on reforms, and I'm tired of it.
Wow. He's failed, and the governor's tired of it. What do you think about that?
If they're friends, it's going to be tough to survive that one. But they're both political players. They both know how to separate probably politics from friendship. But I think Rauner's right. Look, when Rahm came in, he was supposed to be the big reformer, right? He was the one that came from the White House. He knew how to get things done. He knew how to take advantage of crises. The problem was his first one, when he faced the unions in 2012, Karen Lewis ran over Rahm. Rahm buckled, gave more money, gave more benefits, and in the end, that has hurt CPS and pushed it towards bankruptcy further. So Rahm blew it, and I think he's had his chances. He's not the reformer that we thought he was. And now he's paying the price politically and, of course, what's happening in the community.
Yeah, he caved. Karen Lewis just rolled him back then. What I would have done is said, look, you're not educating anybody. Go ahead and strike. There's hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people ready to take those jobs, and do a little bit of a Ronald Reagan, air traffic controller situation. But in the end, Rahm was never a reformer. And speaking of Rahm, let's see, I like to give Rauner some time with that clip that we had before, railing and nailing Emanuel. Let's see what Emanuel has to say a few months ago about this very issue. Pay close attention to what he says, and then we'll comment.
The Chicago Public Schools has a responsibility to students and their education, which is why we put so much emphasis on making sure they have a full school day, they have a full day kindergarten, and they're focusing on getting more and more kids to graduation, which they're doing. As it relates to the finances, just to borrow one word, I do think it's irresponsible for Springfield to continue 40 years of inequity treating Chicago schools different than they treat every other school system. Every other school system that has passed a budget with the assumption that the state will pay their teachers' pensions. They passed that budget. Now, they're not being, quote unquote, using the word irresponsible associated with them. Chicago Public Schools passed a budget with the assumption, like every other school district, that the state will treat every school system the same. CPS is not asking for something special. They're asking to be treated just like every other school system. And so when you use, and I want to rep preference. I agree with Lawrence about fiscal rectitude, making sure budgets are balanced and doing things that are in a responsible way. What I don't believe is that we should continue to ask our students and teachers to bear the burden when the political leaders are not stepping up to their responsibilities.
Ted, when he says we don't want the students and the teachers bearing the burden, he's really just saying we don't want the teachers to bear the burden based on the financial hit they would have to take if things didn't go their way. And I know it's laced in there, he does not care about the students. If he did, they wouldn't have these numbers and he wouldn't be making these comments.
Well, I think the way to look at this for people who don't follow CPS is there's two groups that are controlling more than $6 billion, and that's the administration and that board and the union. They control $6 billion. And so they have this massive power. And anybody who wants to come in and take away that power is taking away their power to control the lives of teachers, students, workers. It's a massive monopoly of control. And I think that's the problem with the system. And the Rauner's coming in with his proposal, and he's upsetting the apple cart. And that's what got Cullerton and all the players, Madigan, worried about that message.
Yeah, they finally have opposition and apparently very strong leader based on his first year in Governor Rauner. Now, the Radogno-Durkin-Rauner plan, I think it does some very, very good things. But you and I have talked off air, you don't think that it's ultimately the solution. What do you think is ultimately the solution to get CPS or other school systems to the place where they're actually educating kids at a cost that's reasonable for the taxpayer?
Look, I think this step is the right step as a first step. CPS and ROM are not making the changes. They don't want to make them. The unions don't want to make them. So I think it's a good step to step in. However, just to temporarily step in and bring some financial control is good. I think what really needs to happen is we need to pass accountability, strip the power away from the unions, strip it from the administration, and eventually we have to start giving the power to parents, for parents to be able to choose what's the best school for their child. And that means moving to education savings accounts or vouchers. Take all that public money, strip the power of the unions and the administration, give that money to the parents in the form of vouchers, and let them choose the school that best meets their needs. And that's the only way you can hold these politicians accountable. Because once the parents have the power to leave, then the administration and the unions have to listen.
Amazing that you introduce competition into a system, not unlike the university level, and the ultimate result of that would be more choice, people being forced to compete for those students, and better education overall.